Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Minds of Mortgage podcast. This is Kelly Yale, and I am joined today by the very infamous Greg Sher, which I said correctly. He's the managing director of NFM. He is a LinkedIn celebrity, and he's also the creator of the All of Us movement. Greg, thank you so much for joining me today.
Wow, you're so official. This is not the Kelly Yale that I've come to love. But I'm ready for this version of Kelly Yale, one of the most talented people ever in our industry. So I'm not surprised you've got many gears. Hey, you ever do this when you were a kid, when you passed the 18-wheeler, 16-wheeler, and then they honked? I used to
sure.
When I was a kid. I mean, I lived for that. I loved road trips. We would do that, and we would play the sign game where you'd have to
100%
A to Z, right?
100%.
And it was very hard to find signs with X's and Z's.
We always use exits for X because you weren't going to find an X, but we definitely played. It was like a bloodbath we had 3 kids. It was like, I can't imagine kids these days. If you told them like, hey, we're going to be in the car for 8 hours and you're not going to have a device with you. And we're going to play a game where you find alphabetical road signs.
Oh, well, I have 2 little ones and it's all about the screen. So that's a major pain point. You'll get me like probably weeping if you go down that road. So let's pivot. Let's take a turn.
All right. Well, listen, you and I just came back from MBA in Denver. And one of the questions that I had, you attend a lot of these events. And when we come back, a lot of people kind of summarize them or they'll say, oh, gosh, I was so excited to be at X. But what I was curious with you is, what did you take from the overall sort of spirit of MBA? Like, how did you feel like people felt and presented, and how did you leave that event?
Well, it was the first time I had been at an event that size and scale since I started pushing the All of Us hashtag. And so I had been at the Housing Wire summit. They had an IMB summit about a month and a half ago, and that was smaller. It was like 250 people, and I loved it. I had a great time, and I'm a big fan of Housing Wire, what they're doing, Clayton and company. But multiply that by 10 or 12, and I was really taken aback in a positive way by multiple things. Number one, the amount of people that came up to me to say, love All of Us, or how do I get involved? Or some people even asked me, what does it mean? Like they were trying to feel me out. Like, is this something I'm doing just for me? Is this something I'm doing just for them? Is it somewhere in between? I'm sure I'm like giving you a question right now. Isn't that amazing? I'm giving you a layup to ask me, to put me on the spot. That's just what we do for each other. But so I felt really great about it. And the vibe was excellent. There's been a lot of attrition. We've gotten our asses kicked for years now. So we're all numb to it. And just to be able to go to an event, have everybody be together, it was like a snowball effect. And one takeaway in particular that I got that I was really excited to see is there was just a lot of women that were coming up to me, and I was overhearing a lot of conversations about, I'm ready to step up. I'm ready to speak out. Empower was amazing. And so when I heard that, it was like the icing on the cake, the cherry on top between all of the momentum of All of Us and that, and just the general vibe in the air. I left the event feeling amazing, even though I had to get up at like 5:30 to fly out the morning that I left back into DC, which is the area that I live in. It was really super positive.
Yeah, I definitely felt the positivity for sure. I think one of the interesting parts for me, well, I found myself in an interesting situation because I spent so much more time with the tech vendors, and I had forgotten what that felt like, right? I mean, I spent a lot of time talking to mortgage leadership, but the conversations were so different for me. And so it was fascinating to get back sort of into my wheelhouse, which is more sort of high level thinking about how technology is going to serve the mortgage industry and less about like kind of the daily woes of the mortgage industry. So that for me was super fascinating.
Yeah, it was interesting you say that. I had the privilege of sitting down with Stan Middleman, the founder of Freedom Mortgage. Monday morning, I interviewed him for about a half hour in an interview that I'm getting together right now. I've got to edit it myself, and I'm doing it. But we talked about technology and how business is changing. And I said, Stan, isn't technology at the epicenter of the future. And he was like, not really. Like, people overcomplicate it. It's very simple. The cost to produce is too much. People have too many layers, and you can manufacture alone for 30 to 40 basis points, is what he told me, matter of factly. And it really has me thinking, like, is that true?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know it is for him, but
Oh,
he's right.
sure.
There's probably truth all around, right? For him and his business, he can manufacture alone that cheaply because he can buy all these books at big multiples and churn them over 4 or 5 different times. So yeah,
Sure.
that's bring the cost down for him. But for those of us that don't have big servicing books, it's a bit more challenging. And I do wonder how technology is going to intercede and impact the business moving
It's
forward. I think there'll be a place for AI. I don't know how much of a place. And I question if we'll ever get to a place where technology replaces that relationship that we build.
Yeah, I think I see technology so differently. And that was one of the things that I noticed at MBA was that people genuinely have no idea what I used to do. And I feel like I'm one of like 3 or 4 people in the country who did what I did. But you look at something like Freedom Mortgage, right? That's the kind of company where you 1000% want dialed in technology based on behavioral data and milestone data and understanding, because you have the first shot at any refi. You have this first shot at looking at any of the behavior. But if you don't have somebody who can sit down at your database and make it work for you, that understanding of technology is really more what I'm talking about when I talk about tech, because there's this interesting world that we live in, right? Where every single person has to spew like AI, AI, AI. And I would say the majority of people have no idea what AI actually looks like inside technology. It's just something everybody says, or they've got a chat bot and they're like, wow. That's not what I'm talking about when I talk about technology. When I talk about technology, I'm talking about how a company approaches their customer experience. And so many pieces of that are layered in the amazing technology that we use at different companies, right? So most of us have a POS, an LOS, a CRM, a home buying thing, something like FinLocker, all of these different pieces. But what people don't understand is how to correctly introduce those pieces of technology, make sure that they're all tied in together, and make sure that they're really serving the consumer. And so that is how technology works for mortgage. And I feel like a lot of times the conversation is like mortgage versus tech for who's going to get things. And that's just not how I kind of view it.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's any question Freedom uses tech, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, I mean, their window's not huge to get in front of that client. They're getting in front of them earlier in the process. So you better bet your bottom dollar he can say that, but that technology definitely plays a part in how they get to those consumers so fast and so frequently. You got to have good
Yeah.
follow-up, right? You got to have drop downs. Had a conversation, customers, was at dinner, said to call back in 48 hours. Like, that's not something you pencil in and follow up on when you've got a book of $1 billion worth of mortgages or $1 trillion or whatever that number is. It's massive.
Yeah. I can't even imagine what that number is.
It's among the bigs.
Oh, for sure, for sure. So let me ask you. So this is kind of a good segue, right? Realistically, and I have to be honest, a lot of times in mortgage, I don't feel like we talk realistically. Not just my personal opinion. We kind of like the fluffy stuff, and we don't like to kind of get into the nitty gritty. But what do you think are going to be the 3 biggest challenges in the next 6 to 12 months for producers around the country?
Well, you can't ask me a question like that without me being prepared. And you didn't go over any of these things, although I did have a choice and I chose to not take any pre-questions. So that, just so people know, I've not been teed up in any way. The 3 biggest challenges. It's a big question, Kelly. Lowering costs. I mean, it's all the same, right?
Cost of manufacture. Yeah.
Yeah, cost of manufacture, making sure that you're integrating overseas and other aspects in a thoughtful way. You cannot put your foot all the way down on the pedal because you'll really rattle your sales folks.
Mm-hmm.
So introducing those pieces that drive the cost down without rattling any cages. It's a balancing act. So I would say that would be number one. I think another challenge is bringing up new blood. We've been doing things the same way for so long, right? We've been just recycling the same producers, signing bonuses, and all these things, which I've been very outspoken, has really perverted the waters.
Yes.
And there hasn't been enough focus on that. And then thirdly, I think figuring out how to solve the affordability riddle. It's just awful right now. According to Laura Escobar, the new chair at MBA, costs $11,000 to manufacture a loan.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing Stan scoffed at, by the way, when we talked. But prices are skyrocketing. And every time prices go up, every time insurance goes up, which according to her, it's gone up 52% in the last 5 years, materials and labor has gone up 31%. I could go on and on with the unfavorable numbers. The NAR settlement, the way fees are paid, like all of these things just continue to push the first-time home buyer more and more down the road from possibilities. And that's the most unfortunate thing. So the third thing is how do we reel those people in? How do we all work together to present that opportunity? What does it look like? And how do we do it?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you named several things that obviously everyone has had as a hurdle in 2024, right? How do we create this pathway to solving all those things? But I think one of the hardest parts for the industry itself is the concept of change, because I came in it in 2012. We had been through 2008. And the thing that I kind of learned very quickly is that we expect it to be cyclical. We expect the ups and downs. We expect all this. But this exact moment in time, it's not so much about the cycle. It's truly about how do we adapt these incredible salespeople who are very accustomed to doing business a different way, and how do we actually get them to feel safe and trust that we have the tech, the support, everything that they need to still do business, hopefully free up some of their time from doing just sort of mundane things, and really kind of showcasing how they can create amazing relationships that yield results, but it has to be met in the middle with relying upon that technology.
Definitely plays a part. I mean, I'd flip around that equation and say, how do we apply many of the attributes you just described to the consumer? How do we get them to trust? How do we get them to feel comfortable? How do we get them to feel like the company they're talking to stands for all the right things? And we know that this generation that we're staring right in the face right now, Gen Z, like they care a lot about working with organizations that give back to the community, that stand for good. And it's that is just going to increase. And to me, that's where we're at so many intersections. Like I've been in the business for 27 years. It's a long time, and had multiple, of these moments, right? Going all the way back to 9/11 and the financial crisis and COVID and Dodd-Frank and the new GFE and all these things. What COVID did is it accelerated the adoption of technology, and it's thrown that into this mix. And so it's real haywire right now. And I think that the company that there's an opportunity now to separate. The companies that figure out a way to identify the right technology and to implement it in a way that's really easy for sales to use, because historically sales doesn't like technology. Let's just call it what it is. Like if they've got to go into more than one system, it's the end of the world.
Oh yes, whenever people talk to me about mortgage technology, they can't believe that my opinion is I don't ask loan officers to sign into technology. I build technology that supports loan officers, meaning that every single thing is already automated. Because if my job is to create opportunities for loan officers, it's not a fishing expedition. I don't need them to sign into 6 different things and figure out 6 different technologies. I know where the technology should be introduced. I know what it does, the way we should be building it. But most companies are so, I don't know, let's just say they're used to this cycle of we hire this great salesperson, they come over and they want this, and we give them this. And I just believe the opposite. I believe that, you mentioned going directly to consumers, right? Or understanding consumers, or understanding this next generation of first-time home buyers. But here's the reality. So few people understand what their consumer journey is. It's baffling. Mm-hmm. And so how does someone in this next generation find you to begin with? What is what is their goal? Do they want to buy a house for 20 years or are they looking for a house for 5 years? Are you having the right conversations about what is smart for their future? How do you gain that trust? You have to give before you ask. And so many of those things, that relationship creation, is not exactly the strongest wheelhouse for salespeople.
Well, you know
You
why,
know,
Kelly? Because
tell me.
it takes a bad word. It's the P word. You know what the P word is, Kelly?
I mean, I know a lot of them, but let's see what yours is.
Yeah, that's very good. Patience. It
Yeah.
takes it takes patience, and we're not patient people in this industry. Leaders aren't patient. They want to know, they want predictability to their P&Ls, especially coming off of really difficult times.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're talking about, building relationships, knowing what people want, investing time, those things, they'll lead to a payoff, but it takes much longer. We're getting to people much earlier on in the funnel. And that is mindset, that's resources. So many things go into that. And for many companies, I believe they're already way, way too far down the road to rewire themselves. And so it presents an interesting opportunity for a new company or new companies to emerge that are patient, that have a low
Mm-hmm.
cost to produce, that are willing to plant those seeds that will sprout up, even if it takes a year or two, through apps like Finlock or through people like Trust Engine and what Dave Savage is doing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of people that are putting the time and energy and effort into identifying people earlier on in the funnel and educating them. And financial literacy, as my friend Dave Savage says, is it's a crisis, and
Mm-hmm.
originators are the first responders. I love how he came up with that. He's really good with those things.
You know, I will give you another P word as well, which to me is critically important, which is pipeline. So many people don't understand how to plan for the quarters forward, right? But every single action or every single day should be focused on two solid ideas, which is how am I going to close loans and how am I going to make relationships? And we, we used to call it prospecting back in the day, right? But it's different now, right? It's omnichannel, many different ways that you have to have a strategy. We're so used to this, I'm going to get a referral, I'm going to do a loan sort of mentality, right?
Yeah.
But it's truly about how to go one to many, right? You have a database of people. How are you going to set yourself up for really successful Q1, Q2 of 2025? But we tend to think in much shorter goals in this industry.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's no question about it. So everyone's got to change the mindset. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Many IMBs have been hanging on by a thread. Here we are on the cusp of winter with a bond yield, at recording here at hovering around 430. We have the election coming up. Not exactly sure when this airs, but it is definitely an environment in mortgage that has a lot of crosswinds blowing all around.
For sure. Well, it's funny because I was actually going to ask you that same thing, which is how do you expect that these large IMBs are going to thrive in 2025? Like, what do you think it's going to take to get them there?
Lower rates.
Well, yes, lower
Sorry.
rates and mic drop. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, I mean that's the only way. That's the only way. More inventory, lower rates. That's it. Maybe some price stability, if not depreciation, that would help too, because that would then put the power back in the buyer's hands. It's a quagmire out there, Kelly.
I agree. So let me ask you this: you specifically at NFM, how are you preparing for the next 6 months? Like, what are you telling people is a good way to thrive?
Well, we're from an operational standpoint. You like how light I'm making it in here? What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Is that too
Beautiful.
bright?
It's so
Is that
good.
too bright? I'm very pale when I do this. I can play with this little app on my phone, but I'm going to go back into the darkness because you're asking about the next 6 months, and that could be
Okay.
that
Get
could
one of
be
those flashlights in front of your chin, like you're
that
telling
could
a
be very
scary
dark.
story.
Could be very dark. So I'm just going to do this.
Perfect.
Hang on by the seat of your pants. You keep doing the activities that it takes. There's still inventory out there. There's still enough. There's less than half the amount of LOs there were at the peak, right? So there's less competition out there. for a diminishing pie, but you just have to continue to stay positive and to do the activities, build new relationships, and really lean into social media. You know that I'm big on that, and I believe in that, and I think that is really at the heart of all the things that we're saying. It's like another tentacle to getting to that relationship, just showing up and showing out as an expert in your field. So if you're used to closing 4 to 6 transactions a month, and it's tough now, or you're heading into the winter months, and you've kind of surrendered to the fact that it might be 1 or 2 for another 4 or 5 months per month, that other time that you have, craft your skills, hone your skills, reinvent
Agreed.
yourself, market,
Yes.
come up with some new ways to do something different and to really stand out. Because I've seen this firsthand, having launched the first ever influencer division in mortgage, which we did NFM back almost 4 years ago. I've seen it firsthand that if you're not driving in leads into the ecosystem, which they're plentiful, you can do that. The even greater impact that you make is when you start putting yourself out there on social media. Real estate agents and referral partners and people you never thought were watching are going to start contacting you to say, how did you do that? How do you record? How do you use CapCut? How do you have the courage to talk like that? How did you become so vulnerable? And all of that leads, you notice what we're talking about? Everything we're talking about is about the relationship.
Uh-huh.
And that's what this business is about. And so you can layer on tech stack after tech stack. That's why I said you have to be really, really intentional with where you drop that into the process, because at the root of all that we do and we're ever going to do when it comes to a purchase this significant is relationships. And so if you're willing to go at that longer time horizon, as I identified, that's crucial, right? But then on top of that, you can show up in front of more people, in front of digital natives like Gen Z in ways that we've never tried to show up before. And I've had a front row seat to that, and it really works. It works with your referral partners. It works with people identifying that you're somebody they can trust. And I don't think Gen Z likes brands. I think they like people. And that's what Gen Alpha's right behind that. It's only going to get more pronounced as we move forward.
It's all very true. You've met me, rather recently. And what's so funny is I wish you would have known me in 2012, because you would have laughed forever. I closed down a social media digital marketing company to go work in-house at a lender. And people all but patted me on the head when I would talk about relational marketing or social media strategies or automating consumer experience. I am not joking around. Oh, God forbid, data. The way that I would bark about your database and all this, but it was like everyone was just like, "Who's this girl? Shush!" And it's been so funny. To your point, you sit there and you watch year after year after year after year. But when I think about it, I'm like, gosh, I really wish we would have been able to harness this so much earlier, because the people who have done tremendously, right? They really have incredible followings, and they really do have relationships that are going to yield results in the future.
Well, you can only do so much when you don't have people supporting you. So I commend you for being too early to the party with that nasty 4-letter word, that nasty 4-letter word, data.
It's funny because I wish that there was like I genuinely wish I had recorded so much more that I used to say, instead of, for so many people, I used to speak all the time, and I used to tell them, your database is your gold mine. I absolutely assure you, if you don't believe me, it's fine. But you should never encounter a human being who isn't added to your database and doesn't have some level of curated relationship follow-up for them, right? Yeah. Because even your real estate agents need to buy houses, need to refinance. And so if we're not looking at people in such a one-to-one direction, right? Oh, I met this person, they're in business, but they're a lawyer, so they're really not for me. Good to meet them. However, if you would have put that person on a campaign where you would have connected with them in social media, understood what their business model is, understood what makes a good referral for them, these are the kinds of automated relationships that can go on if you look at the world as a customer and not just referrals as customers.
No question. Well, I appreciate all the work that you're doing out there to make people more mindful of data. I know you've at one time you built an incredible CRM that launched one of America's biggest companies today. And you don't get enough credit for that. So appreciate that. And I know you've got a lot of work ahead of you still. The best is yet to come of Kelly Yale. And I appreciate being on your grand stage. I know that Anthony Casa, my friend, was on here recently. So these are small shoes to fill. I bet he's like a size 5. So I
Well,
appreciate the time.
yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you one last thing. What's the one thing that you are truly excited about as we wrap up this year?
A restart.
Yeah, a win.
Putting another year behind us, but more forward thinking, like what in the industry am I most looking forward to? It's seeing who the leaders of tomorrow are. I don't have that many years left in this. I'm in my 50s now. I'll be 54 in a few days. And I know there are, through every downtime, there are always these incredible leaders that come up with thoughtful ways to do things differently. And this time period is going to be no different. Like we know who the leaders are of all the big IMBs. Some of them are going to sell, some of them are going to go public, others will roll up under others. But right now, percolating are a lot of names that we don't know, who are starting incredible companies with great focus and vision. And I can't wait to meet those people and maybe even work alongside them in some ways to help them figure out how to do B2B on LinkedIn, which is something I'm super passionate about. So that's the answer. Longer term is seeing who the leaders of tomorrow are. That's what I'm most excited about.
That's a great answer. I love it. Well, I really appreciate you being here with us and sharing insights. And yeah, we'll definitely have you on again in the future.
That is my pleasure. I will talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.